Hey everybody, welcome back to the COWSA podcast. Psych! It's not called the COWSA podcast anymore, and this isn't the third time I've done this intro. It's called Ecopoint Cape Town. Welcome everybody. It's not a new series, still the same old thing that you know and love. Covering local Overwatch stuff, joined by special guests and all that good stuff. But first, I'm joined by my usual co-host, Mr. GeneralSound. And of course, as you can see in the thumbnail and also the title of this video, also joined by Mr. CloudBurst, caster extraordinaire.
Hello there.
So, Cloud, I think the first thing we'll cover with you is we haven't had a real cast on the show. We've on the podcast we've had Gastlee before, but at the time he was a player, and of course Jen and I are no strangers to casting, but we're not dedicated casters. So I think the story that I always wanted to know is how did you find, COWSA? How did you get involved in casting local Overwatch? Are you here forever? Are you leaving us tomorrow? What's the story?
Okay, so if I go to where I started, I think it's better if I start with where I started with casting, which goes back about 2.5 years or so. I went to an event hosted by Kylo Ren actually at the time for Heroes of the Storm and Hearthstone, and I assisted with getting the observer going because they were just having a bit of issues there, and I just started giving kind of a slow play-by-play for the people there, and people seemed to like it, and then there was another event, and then they were like, okay, cool, cast. And then I casted for Energy, Ventus, and Bravado for Heroes of the Storm. And that was my first time ever in front of a stream casting. And that was quite a lot of fun. And then as things progressed, I casted for a few other smaller things. I did a bit of arena casting when Overwatch started, alongside Dib. But then it kind of just all came to a halt. I didn't really cast anything more. And then Kylo Ren just decided, hey, why don't we try cast a game together? So we hopped
Game of
onto the
Overwatch.
a game of Overwatch, yes. So we hopped onto the COWSA Discord, got into contact with VSG, and pretty much signed up as casters and said, when's our, well, what can we do? And we actually, I think we casted a scrim, was our first match that we casted.
Hmm.
And then from there, I was a bit more active in the COWSA Discord, and people were like, hey, why don't you actually get a bit into casting? We like what you're doing. And the rest is pretty much history from there.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I first heard you cast with, I think it was with Naori and Donna May. I sent a message in the Discord saying, hey, you're actually pretty good. Like, keep doing what you're doing. And obviously, at the time, you were a bit rough around the edges, having not much experience casting Overwatch, but
Yeah.
you jumped out to me, at least immediately, as someone who is not cold on the mic, at the time, I didn't know you'd had experience before, but hearing that you do have experience, it all fits into place now a lot better.
I mean, definitely.
Yeah, that's cool. But obviously, we're super pumped to have you on the podcast, but also in the community in general. The level of casting has gone up from the days when General and I were casting one game a month, and Naori and Mutant were casting, one game a week, 2 games a week. It's like every week, 3, 4, 5 games between you and Trinoc. The broadcasting level and production value's gone up, and also just the amount. It's crazy.
Well, I've got to say, yeah, go ahead.
One question I got, like, how was it transition from StarCraft? Did you say?
From Heroes of the Storm.
Heroes of the Storm to Overwatch.
Yeah. So I mean, as a transition, it was quite an interesting one because the first time I did Overwatch, I mean, the game was brand new, and there was no like solid structure, and I definitely didn't have the experience with it either. I think at that point I had 5 hours playtime maximum, so it really wasn't much from that. But I think something that you get from Heroes of the Storm is it's also a game that doesn't have much downtime, and I feel that's also, well, that's very much what Overwatch is like. There's not
very ability based as well.
Yes, it's very ability based. There's cooldowns. You have your each character does something different. It brings something different to the team depending on how it's going. And I think the biggest part is not much downtime. And when the action hits the screen, the action is in your face and it
Yeah.
happens quickly, and there's a lot to cover very quickly, which I find that's similar in both games.
And that's the first thing we kind of notice is that you excel in that moments when a lot of things are happening. And yeah, that's really well done, dude.
And building hype as well, I
Yeah.
think is one of the bigger things as well. Something Trinoc's also been picking up a lot more recently. It's just getting excited when exciting things happen.
Yeah, I've got to put huge props out to Trinoc. He's putting out so
Yeah.
much work in this casting and huge improvements throughout. So I just have to put a word out for the man
100%.
there. He's really doing a lot of work there.
Yeah, without a doubt. Can't say enough good things about him. So, CloudBurst, going forward, where are you looking to go with this whole casting gig? Are you sticking around? Are you leaving us tomorrow?
I wouldn't quite say leaving you guys tomorrow. I've actually made quite a few good friends in the community already for the short time I've been a part of it. It's a really great community throughout. But if I look at long term, I would love to take this to a full-on career. I know that right now that's a pipeline dream, but it's something I would like to take small steps towards. And in mid-short term, I'd like to pick up some more tournaments when they come through for Overwatch in South Africa. I know that our scene is growing and there should be more tournaments coming up soon.
Yeah.
So hopefully I would be able to do that and get my name out there a bit more and market myself more. And at the end of the day, I really do believe in community in this country, especially when it comes to esports. And I think it's something that needs to grow. So what I would like to see myself in short term is to be a part of growth for this community, as well as growth for my own brand as a caster, and see where that can take me going forward. I don't quite have a solid goal set just yet.
I got another question. Like, what are you doing to improve yourself to like understand Overwatch and to cast it at a high level?
So that's quite a broad one in regards that there's a lot of small things I do, I'd say. I'm not I would love to put more time into it. However, I'm not quite someone who's watching Overwatch League whenever it's on or anything like that. I try watch highlights that other channels curate from Overwatch League and things like that, or times when cast is really shown and things like that.
Yeah.
If I also look at broadcast.gg, they have been an amazing resource for all sorts of things in regards to production value, observing, as well as casting, which is a fantastic, I'd say, resource. It's been extremely valuable to me improving. And interacting with the community, I'd say, is the biggest drive I've had towards improving with this. Just being able to talk to someone about a strategy or something like that, because just watching it happen doesn't really, it doesn't equate to the amount of knowledge that you get discussing about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the biggest boost, or probably the biggest effort I have towards improving my understanding of the game and my casting style. I mean, I know that you two joined me alongside Gastlee recently. We actually went over one of our VODs and we had an awesome chat about where we can improve casting, where we can improve the production value, and all sorts of things like that. And that's been absolutely invaluable to me improving.
Yeah, that was we've done it once now. I think it was last week, and it was actually, it's so useful for everyone involved, because we were covering one of your games that you and Gastlee casted, and it's even so useful for myself and Jen, I'm sure, just to see what mistakes you're making and the same mistakes that we make, and just to be able to take a step back and think about what you're saying, why you're saying it, what are you looking at, what are you analyzing, like all those kind of things. Just ask those questions and have a discussion about what, all of the answers to those questions. So like that's something I would recommend to any upcoming casters to improve yourself. Do that VOD review, but do it with people who don't necessarily cast with you and don't exist in your sphere.
Yes, definitely. Couldn't agree more.
So I think that about covers CloudBurst and in context of casting. Obviously, thank you so much for being on. You're not going anywhere just yet, but thank Thanks for being here. I think it's awesome to hear about how you got your start in casting, and you've become a really big part of the community. So hopefully you'll be here for a while to come.
Thank you so much, and I hope the same. I'm definitely not going anywhere anytime soon, and I'll be live on your screens before you know it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, so moving on to the next topic of conversation, which is just a recap of the week's games in both divisions. And we'll start with First Division as we usually do. And in First Division, we're seeing a lot develop. Actually, First Division is quite interesting this season.
Yeah.
I think we don't really have a good sense. We thought we did, but I don't think we do have a good sense of the kind of power rankings of the teams in
Yeah.
First Division. When there've been a lot of what we would consider upsets happening.
Like I feel.
And I think before we get started, though, I
Yeah.
would just like to mention the Trinoc underdog situation. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
they've had to forfeit and retire from First Division for the rest of the league.
I'm really
Really
sad about that.
unfortunate for
Actually.
them. Yeah, it is super duper disappointing. Like they were involved in okay. Let's not talk about them in the past tense. They do still exist. They are busy picking up new players and filling the slots that were left to them by the departure of two of their players, I believe.
Do you know who the two players
Yeah.
are?
I actually do. I will get you those player names in 2 seconds. Sorry, I was actually just discussing this with
It's fine.
someone recently when we were looking at rosters.
So
You
they
carry on. I'll come back to it.
yeah. So they have unfortunately forfeited for the rest of the leg. They will be back strong next leg, hopefully, if they get their ladder games in.
Yeah.
And that will be, we're super excited to see what they bring next leg.
It's unfortunate because we were expecting them to do well this leg. Like we've been saying it podcast after podcast that they're gonna be up there. And it was a surprise to the community as a whole that this was gonna happen. So hopefully they come stronger, yeah.
Yeah,
and they're really committed to not going anywhere. So that's good to see.
Yeah.
As in,
Yeah.
oh, that sounds negative. Sorry, CloudBurst, to cut you off.
Not
They're
a
really
problem.
committed to staying in the community and staying motivated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that from their players as well through the albeit brief interactions I've had with them. They're definitely mainstays in the community, and they also want to see their team grow with the community as well. The two players that left were Hamster Jam and Sir James Bar, which I found that's the reaction I had as well. When I casted one of their matches, obviously the leg before this one, Sir James Bar performed so much as an off tank for their team. His diva was quite insane, picking up so many very important skill shots and such through her defense matrix. So it's interesting to see that one go, but I don't know if he's adapted to the meta shift that we've seen, because he was a very good dive player. So it could be that's playing a bit of a part in it there.
Yeah.
We don't know. I think it'd be disingenuous of us to speculate.
I have Sir James Bar on my friends list on Battle.net, and I see he tried like playing comp was on Zaya because I know he used to one trick diva quite a bit, and I'm sure it probably did affect him because Zaya is not an easy hero to like master and get on a high level. So I don't know. I don't assume that, but yeah, it'd be unfortunate to think that's the case. You know.
Yeah, my suspicion is that there's a reason. There's a reason.
Definitely. Yeah.
It's not a nebulous kind of I'm not enjoying the game. Who knows?
Yeah.
It bottom line is sucks, but they will be back. If all you Chronic Underdogs fans, don't fear. So before they forfeited, they did play against Interitus, which they dropped 3-0, but they played 5-6 in that game. So that's again why I think there's something going on there. That means those players aren't able to play as much anymore. So yeah, unfortunate for them. But moving on down the list here, Project Allflex played against Equinox, beat them 3-1. I think a fairly expected result. Project Allflex is a team Jen and I at least had pitted for the top of the leg this leg.
We have to mention though that they got a 3-0 against AGC Slinky. They lost.
Yeah, exactly.
So
That is very true. AGD Slinky put himself on the map with that result.
yeah, and then they lost. ADG Slickly lost against Perseus 3-0 last game. So it's like you said, we can't tell what's the power rankings at the moment, but yeah, it's insane. Like teams are actually taking games off each other at the moment. So what we're not expecting. So
Yeah, I mean that's what we want to see, right?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, from my side, upsets are always something that you want to see. It also shows that teams aren't just sitting on their laurels, they're really working together to improve, which is nice to see teams that were losing to some or were beating some. It's flipping, the tables are being flipped, and it's great to see because it breeds more competitive spirit throughout.
Yeah. And OG Ominence,
Exactly.
they actually 3-0 now in the league. Not like they
Yeah.
1-3 and didn't lose, but the 2 wins that they got out of the 3 was forfeits.
Yeah, they've been saying they just want to play some Overwatch, but everyone's so scared of them. They just one team forfeited the game, one team forfeited the whole league. Yeah, so can't really read much into OG's performance, but like a clean 3-0 victory against Perseus says something about how they're performing. So keeping an eye on OG going forward, see how they can perform against some of the other big hitters in this league.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but OG Ominence were in Prem Division previous legs?
Yeah, it was leg 1. They were in Prem.
They went straight from the qualies into Prem Division.
Okay, and then I assume they were relegated. Which leg were they relegated in?
Leg 2.
Last leg. Okay, so it's quite recent they're in first div, and they're showing that they're playing on top of first div from there. So
they weren't bad last league.
So they were relegated at the end of leg 1, just to clarify. So they were in first div last leg.
They weren't bad. Like they weren't bad last league. If Sunny recall, they weren't a bad team, but just Prodigy and Phoenix Rising was just stronger.
And they did drop to Trinoc on Dogs as well. So I think they've been going through a lot of changes, role changes, personnel changes. We know obviously recently they picked up Mutant Gun to fill that slot of main tank, I believe he's playing. Could be wrong.
Scrum them, and he wasn't doing bad as a main tank.
No, he's not bad at all. He used to play main tank on DDC Time Surge, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Way back in the day. So yeah, quite a storied main tank. Then on the other side of that same coin, Perseus Res. Quite a disappointing season so far, although they do have a 3-1 victory over Interitus. But they did drop 0-3 to Ominence, and
they beat AJ Slicky.
They beat. Oh,
I mentioned that. Man.
I'm actually so dumb. Never mind. Like
they're having
take
a strong
that
season.
argument I just gave
strong
and
league.
flip it the other way around. The only team they've lost to is OG, which is putting their name down as the best first division team, maybe, probably. So to drop to OG's
quoting Mutant Gun from the weekly show. Mutant Gun said they wrecked them with zero. So
can't argue with that. At least in scoreline, they definitely took that one pretty confidently. But otherwise, like you said, beating ADG Slinky, I'd love to see how they stack up against a team like Project Allflex.
Yeah, I believe they had network issues from what Alibi was telling me, because I am doing coaching on the sideline with him. And they had people coming late and then network issues, and that's how they lost against Perseus. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So Perseus, something to keep an eye out for here.
Yeah.
Looks like they could be fighting with maybe Allflex for the second place if we assume OG's going top.
I think OG will take it comfortably, because like I'm feeling now the teams are not they don't have a structure and they're just playing as they will. And OG is a team that's been through Prem, been through last leg, and they just know how to move forward. So but you never know. Like Project last leg, they came out strong end of the league. So maybe you find Project again making some magic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I that's one game I'm interested to see. is Orflex versus Perseus and Ominous versus Slinky, to kind of get a
Those
better
will be
sense
good
of how
matches.
to kind of get a sense of how those four, how it looks top teams will match up against each other. But moving on to the next team, let's look at. Sorry.
Interitus.
Yeah, Interitus next, and the next OG team. Putting in decent performances, but I think losing to the teams we'd consider stronger than them. I think their performance is about where we would expect it to be. Dropping games to teams like Perseus and who's the other team they lost to?
I believe they played Equinox this week, but
Mhm.
it was 2-2. And there was some issues that happened in game. Now they have to
Yeah.
play the game decider sometime this week, so they have to play one map again over.
So yeah, that information is subject to change. At the moment, it's down to 3-1 here, but that game still needs to be completed. That's super unfortunate actually, and I think what ended up being the deciding factor on awarding that map to Equinox was that the rules state if the lobby settings are wrong, and there's evidence of it, and the game was casted, so there is evidence of it. The team that made the mistake forfeits the map, and so that meant Interitus had to forfeit the map, and now it stands at 2-2, ready to be completed. And I mean, it was a really good match. Clearly, these teams closely matched. So I think Equinox, especially, is going to be excited to have a second shot at winning this
game.
This game, yeah.
Especially seeing as if this didn't happen, they would be looking at a reverse sweep situation that they would have to go through, winning the next 2 matches in a row. And
Yeah.
winning one by default, it's only needing one map to really decide it, is good for Equinox. A bit of a shame for Interitus, of course. It is something that happens, but you'll have to see if they can keep that 3-1. Well, it'll be a 3-2, but it'll still feel like a 3-1.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a cautionary tale to captains. Make sure your lobby settings are right. I've been in a situation against Nova X, actually, who 2 of their players are now on my team, where they messed up the settings on the first map, and it just kind of throws the whole situation into disarray and gets confusing. Nobody's really happy with how it turns out, because the winning team is like, oh, it's like not a big deal. The losing team is like, it's kind of a big deal. So
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It really throws everything to disarray. So captains, just make sure your settings are sorted before you start the match. And opposite captains, check the settings to keep everyone on their toes. So on the topic of Equinox, we look at their season next. Not quite where they would like to be, but they are a very new team coming straight up from the ladder. They've dropped that one map to Interitus. They've dropped that map to Interitus, which is obviously still pending. They've dropped 3-1 to Project Allflex Rays, which is not, all things considered, not a bad result, considering how we rank Project Allflex. And they've also dropped and they've got that def win against Chronic Underdogs. So yet to take a proper victory. This Interitus game could be pivotal to their momentum going forward this late.
I think something like that's super important for a team as well. If they have been in a bit of a losing streak, so to speak, and being able to bounce back from that is definitely going to do a lot for them. And maybe we'll see a bit more of them going forward and more impressive results. As you say, a new team. I mean, there's a lot of kinks to work out when you're a new team.
For sure. Then finally, last team we haven't mentioned yet, CSG Exotium. Actually been around for quite a while. I remember beginning of the year hearing about them around, but they've kind of been on a hiatus and in ladder for the last couple of legs. But they also, with that def win over Chronic Underdogs, and then a loss to Slinky, a 3-0 loss, and a 3-0 loss to Project Allflex, as well as a forfeit loss to OG. So really not off to the best of starts, but also quite an inexperienced team, also straight up from ladder. So lots to learn from these results.
It kind of seems like it paints a bit of a picture that teams coming up from ladder to first division maybe don't expect such a big jump in experience from teams,
Mm,
especially seeing as this is a pretty stacked first division at the moment with a team
Yeah.
like, well, Slinky, Ominence, and Project Allflex. I would say definitely the top three if you take Slinky
Perseus,
current network issues away
Perseus
there.
as well.
Perseus as
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
definitely can't leave them out on that at all. Um, so I mean that's four teams already that they have to deal with that are pretty strong teams.
Yeah.
So I understand how it's such a big jump for Exitium and Equinox coming into first division from ladder.
exactly. And it's it is possible to perform really well though. You look at a team like Chronic Underdogs, they come in from ladder last leg and really took
Yeah.
everyone in first division by storm. But like you say, coming up if you don't have that experience before can be really tough. But
Yeah,
hopefully they'll learn from this experience, and if they do drop down to ladder, bounce back up next leg again. But another important point is just to understand how the ladder system works, and I think that really makes it hard for ladder teams to gain that experience before they hit first division, right? Because they don't get a lot of opportunity to play high pressure matches because
Yeah.
it's a lot of the ladder teams find it quite difficult to organize ladder matches because
I
there's so
think
few of them.
I think
And
what Chronic
the
underdog sorry, son. What
no, go
Chronic
for it.
did well was they scrimmed first division teams quite a bit
Mm,
before they got into first division. And
yeah,
that's what made them look so good, you know what I mean?
yeah, for sure. So I think that about sums up first division. We've got to keep our eyes on that top four. I think it's really difficult to say how that all going to play out by the end of the season. That's going to be really exciting to watch. So
yeah.
as we, oh, sorry, go for it.
I was just gonna add on to what you were saying there in the fact that once the top four teams are going up against each other some more, we're gonna see a lot of heads clashing there,
Hmm.
and some very interesting games there because seeing who can make it up to Prem between these four teams is going to be interesting to see for one. And being able to watch those matches as well, those are going to be quite high intensity matches, I take it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm sure Trinoc is really covering these matches going forward.
Mm-hmm.
He's been really working hard on getting the first division matches
I
casted.
100%
So
agree with him because I know what it feels like to play in first division and not get casted. It's not
yeah,
fun. Yeah.
definitely. It is really awesome that everyone's getting coverage pretty evenly. Um, so yeah, that about sums up first division. So let's move on to Premier Division. This is both of these divisions are really up in the air at the moment. The power rankings are really hard to read
Yeah.
with some big upset victories and losses and new teams with a whole lot of new players. I'm really excited to see how this all plays out. But let's start at the top with a team that's currently undefeated with 4 victories and 0 losses, and that's WRG Boosters. I think
Yeah.
not surprising anyone, but not looking quite as untouchable as they have in the past, perhaps.
Yeah. 2CP taking a map off them last night. That was a surprise.
Yes, and they look dominant in that back.
Yeah. So
On Oasis.
I think it's the roster changes from Visions going to like a off tank DPS role
Yeah.
and Kraken's going into support. So maybe they're still working on the synergy. But yeah, you can see it that's happening at the moment. But give it some time. I think they're gonna be very, very strong with how they're running things at the moment.
For sure. Cloud, anything to say about Boosters? Just to cover the results. It's been a 3-0 over Phoenix Rising, a 3-0 over Prodigy, and a 3-0 over Dominion. And they dropped their first game against 2CP in a 3-1 victory on yesterday.
Yeah, I think that as you've said, is that they're extremely dominant, and it's part of what would be expected, especially seeing them top of the logs consistently throughout. And I think seeing a team like 2CP taking a map from them shows them that there are still some teams in Prem that are going to be chasing their tail and really trying to get a leg up on them. And having teams able to do it puts out such a nice narrative for us especially and the community. Seeing something like that happen it's an exciting thing to be a part of. And I think seeing if they can keep their streak up going forward, or if we're going to see any teams kind of steal another map from them, maybe 2 maps, and keep them on their toes, it's going to be an interesting one.
For sure. Jen and I have discussed actually our kind of perceived power rankings, having played some of these teams.
Yeah.
And we'll get into it a bit, but I think we're thinking Booster is not going to be on top by the end of the story, hey?
Yeah. If like I said, if they get the synergy with their new roster, I think it's possible that they'll end first, but the way Unidentified's playing.
Yeah, I think that's a big one we're looking at. Unidentified looking pretty strong, but we'll get to them and jump the gun here. Okay? let's look at the team in second place here. Only reason they're not in first place is because they haven't played as many matches, because they're also undefeated, 3-0-0. But not quite as clean as the WRG Boosters guys have been, because they have played Goliath Gaming, and Goliath Gaming did take them all the way, and which must have been a real barn burner of a match. But unfortunately, it was lined up to be casted, but then CloudBurst had to ruin everything.
That was a terrible situation. It was a match I was really looking to casting as well. I expected for it to be something between. I thought it was going to be a 2-2 match that goes to map 5. I did expect for Eden to take it over Goliath Gaming, but seeing Goliath's current aggression and their playstyle and the way they keep things together, I really thought they would give Eden a run for their money, and they did. So I'm extremely disappointed that I had technical issues that night, and it's something that sometimes can't be avoided. And it was 20 minutes before I was going to go live, and then my internet cut out, and I was like, it happens.
It really happens. It's so unfortunate. But I mean, if you cast 100 games in a month, it's likely that at least a couple of them are going to not go according to plan. So.
Exactly.
So yeah, that was a really awesome match. Would have loved to have seen, but unfortunately, as Cloud just explained, didn't quite pan out. Then the clean 3-0 versus 2CP, and a clean 3-0 versus Prodigy Race. So their first real competition was GG, and I'm interested to see how they fare against some of the other top teams.
Yeah. I think everybody want to just see them like take on Unidentified as well.
Yeah, and that rematch against Boosters, that's the one everyone's got their eyes on. Because GG, reminder for you guys at home who've forgotten, Goliath Gaming did beat them last leg, right? 3-1 in a real fun match to watch. So this is a good result as far as Eden's concerned to kind of recoup that win and put Goliath Gaming back in their place, I'm sure, as far as Eden's concerned. So moving on now, here we get to Unidentified. This is a real interesting team. A team with so much raw talent. It's crazy how good these kids are. Yeah. And they are kids, they're young. But importantly, what they've got since the end of the last leg is a very old, wise head in the form of Siggs, formerly main tank of Pulse Gaming. And I think what his effect, and also the effect of Gutbuster's another kind of older, wise guy, is grounding them a little bit. They're playing smarter, they're playing sharper, they're practicing harder than ever. This is an extremely scary team.
We could see it in our game against them, son. Like when we pressurize them, they would like get back and then take good positioning, and then just make it impossible for us to show our aggression again. So they're a team that can adapt really fast at the moment, and you couldn't see it last leg. So definitely credit to Siggs and Gutbuster putting that team together.
So,
for sure.
something I could add on that is I casted alongside Gastlee for the Goliath Gaming versus Unidentified match, where
Oh, that happened
Unidentified
already.
actually
Yeah.
took Goliath Gaming 3-1, which is quite a big upset, I would say, especially seeing as Goliath taking Eden quite far. So seeing something like that come up is quite exciting, especially in the fact that one of the points we were making whilst we were casting was that Goliath Gaming is probably going to be the more structured team. They've been together for a long time. They know how to play structured. They're also, as you said a lot, their team is older than Unidentified, being quite young.
Mm.
And seeing Unidentified apply so much pressure on them and keep them back to put them into a 3-1 was extremely exciting. And Unidentified is definitely a team to watch this current leg.
Yeah.
No doubt
Like,
about it.
absolutely. In my opinion, and Jen, I'm sure you'll back me up on this, probably looking at that top spot.
Yeah.
Really, that is how good they're looking
I
at
wouldn't
the
be
moment.
surprised if they are in first this leg, 100%.
Mm. And I mean, they've already proven, like Cloud has just alluded to, by beating Goliath quite handily, and Goliath taking Eden so far, there's a decent chance that Unidentified is going to really put Eden's feet to the fire and push them all the way to the brink and probably, possibly even beat them. And that'll be a huge statement for them. So moving on from Unidentified, we move on to the aforementioned Goliath Gaming, a team that Lagbeast likes to complain everyone underestimates all the time. We don't give them their dues, and I think it's fair. For some reason, we don't look at Goliath Gaming like the strongest team in the country, even though they were top of the leg, tied with Eden and Boosters at the end of last leg. But started with a difficult start so far, losing that game to Eden in a very close match, and also that game to Unidentified, which we were just talking about. But they did manage to take a win over. Let me just look down my list here. Over Dominion, 3-0 win over Dominion. So also they've yet to beat any strong competition, any of the top teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting. Also, seeing coming up very shortly, they're going to be up against one of the top teams very soon. But of course, we can talk about that later. They have quite a steep hill to climb here. Seeing as you just mentioned their current standings and what they've gone up against. But I think they're the type of team that can really keep it together, and we've seen that in their all-out aggression in their playstyle, and the fact that they're always able to bring it back with the team. So
Yeah.
I think definitely a team that often isn't mentioned enough for their power, because they're often overshadowed by WRG Boosters and Eden. But I think it's also a team to watch out for going forward from their current unfortunate start.
Yeah, for sure. You've watched a couple of the games now, Cloud. Do
Yeah.
you see inflexibility as perhaps a weakness of theirs?
I would definitely say so. I think they have quite a structured. They might even be over-structured in some regards, actually, as a point there. Often they have their comfort picks, and when it works, they like sticking with it. And when it doesn't work, sometimes they have a bit of a delay to switch it up and just go a bit out of the box to what they're used to, just to get past that point or past that choke point, get rid of one aggressor on the opponent's team that really they need to deal with, things like that. But I hope that's what they can do going forward, coming up to a really big match, as I'm hinting at.
Subtle, very subtle. Interested to see how they fare against the rest of the top teams. Phoenix Rising Overwatch next. Who are they? Anybody heard of them? I don't know anything about them. I haven't seen any of their matches. So.
I have this sense that they're very close by, but I'm not too sure about it. It's just one of those things that you can feel it, but you can't see it.
Yeah. Jokes aside, Jen and I, very intimately familiar with this team for one very specific reason. But yeah, difficult start to the league so far, but I think we're about where we were expecting to be at this
Yeah.
early stage with our current composition.
Yeah, I think most of the results it was expected,
Yeah.
but I'm happy to see progress, and I think from moving forward, like our targets that we have discussed on, don't know if I want to make it public. I think if we can,
It's up to you.
if we can
Hint it at
put our eyes on the goal, I think we can definitely stay in Prem, because
Yeah,
at
and
the
that
moment
is
public
our
knowledge is our
goal.
goal is just to stay in Prem. Yeah.
Mm.
I think just from my side, from what I've seen from the team, Phoenix Rising being the team I'm talking about, definitely. I mean, how much of your roster has changed between the legs recently? Actually, let me start with that.
Half of the roster.
50%.
50%.
Yeah, 50% of the roster. So that's 50% of adjustments from just getting used to the team, and the other 50% getting acquainted with the team.
Mm.
So you guys have quite a lot of growth you still need to go through,
Yeah.
and instantly having 50% starting in Prem with basically a new roster.
Yeah.
It's going to be a bumpy start, but as Jen just said, having that goal in mind is really what you need. And if
Mhm.
you're able to keep that goal in mind and aim for it, you guys are that's where growth starts. And I think that's definitely what Phoenix Rising needs to do.
I think we've identified that. We like the beginning. We were like, look here, we're getting tough fixtures, we're getting boostios, and then we're getting unidentified. So we kind of went into the games just like, we're going with a learning mindset. We go in with what we practice and stick to what we practice and try to fix the flaws. You know what I mean?
Keep that morale going.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for us, we're also kind of, for me at least, it's just a question of time. We feel like we're on the verge of being a really good team, and as we play more together, as we practice more, we're getting better and better and better. And at some point, we're gonna start challenging these top teams, and that's not just like, personal bias or bravado. It's kind of, if we look at the players we've picked up and the mentality of those players and the skill as well, we feel there's a good chance as the legs go on, we're gonna start challenging the GGs and the Edens and the boosters and identifiers, So we're feeling confident in our long term here, I think.
Yeah.
From my side, that's something I'm really excited to see. I love seeing, as I said earlier, I love seeing narrative have the teams that are currently having rocky starts or aren't quite known as top of the log, and they're really bringing it up similar to unidentified. So I hope you guys can follow in the path they've made and really give us that zest that we need in the current Prem division.
For sure. And just to go through to our results so far, it's been 3-0 loss to Boosters, 3-0 loss to Unidentified, but the Unidentified match felt so much better than the Boosters match. I don't know if you agree, Jay.
Yeah, 100%.
Just in terms of how we were playing. Even though it was the same result, the games were so much closer than the Boosters games.
Yeah, and that was just a week apart, if I do stand corrected. Yeah, and having something like that go just a week apart really shows that the team is working on it. And yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so we're excited to go forward. We did pick up that win versus Dominion, though. That felt good. That is our actual first win in Prem in the whole year. So that felt good. It was a good motivation. And it was a nice clean 3-0 as well. So moving on to a team shrouded in a mild bit of controversy, I would suggest, and that's Prodigy Race. They are sitting currently at 1-2, and their one victory came in what some would consider controversial circumstances. And that was the victory over 2CP. So we'll touch on this briefly. We won't have a whole long story here. But they did use an international player, which is, of course, permitted by the rules. But they used an international grandmaster player who's believed by some to have carried them to victory. So, Jen, I'm going to put this one on you
Yeah.
you can say what you like. Obviously you're very
I've-
familiar with the team and their structure, so
Look, yeah, I've had
you should be on
experience against Raft, and Raft is being the GM international.
Mm-hmm.
I played with him in some comp games as well. I feel like 2CP, the level they play at, should beat him. I mean them with him on their roster, like 100%. I've seen them beat him before, so I don't want to make it a negative thing, but at the end of the day, I think Prodigy can be underestimated. They're a really good team. They have players that grind, and yeah, for me, like, if the person I'm like the most scared of a Prodigy, and he's gonna smile when I say this, is Ericsson. He's been a real carry for them. Like, I fear him more than Raft, 100%. But because Raft at the moment, I see him just play quick play. He plays a bit of comp. He's not somebody that's like really active. So I was surprised by the result, 100%.
Just something from my side, from the outside in on I don't know the teams too well, but I do know 2CP they are quite a strong team in Prem.
Yeah.
Although also a team this week, they had quite a bit of a rough week, suffering a 3-0 from Eden, and then going into this Prodigy game, I don't think they were expecting Raft on the roster.
Yeah.
So having him there could have thrown them off a bit. And something that I do think, just shortly touching on it, is that having one player on a team as a carry, especially with the controversy we've had about internationals, the rest of the team has to still play around it.
Yeah.
So they can't just let that international go do his thing. They still have to work with him. And my understanding, Raft has been on the roster as a reserve player for quite a while as well. So, and they have said that it was a last resort situation. So I think well-deserved Prodigy, a good win there. And I'm interested in seeing what the team can do going forward. They've really gone up against WRG, so hopefully the rest of Prem can be a bit more of a opposite of an uphill battle. I don't want to say a downhill slide, because it's definitely not going to be that.
We are very wary of them coming into this game. We're playing them this weekend, so we're going to put a lot of work in this
But it's one of the games we focus quite heavily on winning, because if we beat Prodigy, there's a good chance we stay in Prem next leg, and that's our first goal. So that is a game we're looking out for, and we're not underestimating them by any stretch of the imagination. Having seen them play, we casted the game I and Naro the other day against Boosters, and they're a good team, and we know that, and we're, especially now with this result against 2CP, got to keep an eye on them, with or without GM carries. So another part of that controversy was the question of, should internationals be allowed? So briefly, what are your guys' view on that? Should internationals be allowed in the DGL?
I'm gonna hand it to Jen to start off.
I'm very 50-50 on the whole situation, because like how I feel, like having internationals is also good for local players to progress and see where they stand against international players, because you're not going to get it in ranked, like playing against a GM or at the level where you must win, you know what I mean? Like, like we do get it in pugs, but it's like people don't take pugs and like as serious as like the league, you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
But on the other hand, I've seen a lot of progress with players like in teams where it's just full South African rosters climb SR and get better, you know what I mean? So it's a give and take situation, but I don't think it's a big factor, because I would prefer learning to shut down any international and, you know, as a team, like a so-called carry, and going into the next game, like with a full South African roster and knowing how to like shut down like players has high like that's high impact players, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so, for sure.
I'm very on the board on this one.
Yeah, so So for me, from my standpoint, of course, I haven't been in the community for too long. I'm quite new to the community in that regard. I wasn't here last year, and I know that there was a situation last year where internationals couldn't make it to the LAN at the end
Yeah.
of the season when the finals take place. And I know that's one of the big concerns of the community at the moment.
Yeah.
And just to keep it short and simple, I think that there needs to be some sort of threshold in place. I'm not too sure about what the threshold needs to be, but there needs to be guidelines of what an international player, what defines a legal international player for your team. I think might be a bit of something that needs to be done. Of course, I'm not giving a solution. I don't have a solution at all.
So,
But
but
I
what
don't.
Like-
kind of definitions are you looking for here?
Um, I'm
Just
not.
just a sense
Yeah,
of it,
just
yeah.
almost like spitballing it. I'm thinking of some sort of way that if an international is going to be affecting your placement in the league, they're going to be able to stay with your team for the finals if you make it there. And I think
Okay.
that's probably the biggest point about it.
Yeah.
If your international is carrying your team,
Yeah.
your opposing team isn't doing enough to counteract what your
Yeah.
team is doing, unless you have the best all-star team in every single position, which I don't think is a realistic thought in any sport, so to speak.
I always want to
So,
add on as well.
Mm.
I was on a team that had internationals and on a team that had one international when, like last season,
With
we were allowed
after
two. Yeah. And the one thing that used to tilt me is when you rely on that internationals, right? And I would rather, like, if you're going to have an international in your team, make sure that international's teaching every player, like, even the sub, you know what I mean, who's a DPS player that's under him. Like, give him that training, give him that, how can I say, building blocks to become a star DPS player. And
yeah,
that's
I
something that
think
I would like what I enforced in teams that I was with international players on our roster, yeah.
Yeah, I think to take away from that, have your international player augment your team. Don't make your team build around the international player. And I think that's very important, not just for a team's perspective, it's also for a community perspective, that having international players take part in our community, which is extremely small compared to the rest of the world, having that type of experience for one and exposure is extremely, extremely great. But don't build it around that. Otherwise, we're just going to be melding in with other situations, so to speak. It's not going to be as much of South African talent being showcased, and I think that's quite a big point to make out of that as well.
For sure. The only thing I would add to any of these conversations is that it's important to remember the context of this particular competition, and that is it's a local competition meant for local players to show what they've got, with a LAN competition at the end of the day. At the end, and if you are being quote unquote carried by an international player who can't go to the LAN, all you're doing is, and if you go to the LAN and don't perform as a direct result, all you're doing is taking spots away from a team that might have been able to go to that LAN and actually put up good results. And that for me is the real crux of this issue. Because if you can take your international to an event, then in my opinion, I don't have an issue with that. We've got a limit on the number of internationals for a reason, so we're not just playing against European teams or whatever coming here to take our money. So we if you can get that international, as long as you're not taking spots away from another team, I personally don't have an issue with it, and we don't really have a huge issue with it because there's only actually one team that regularly uses an international.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's one
and
team like actively using
yes, as part of their main roster. And I believe they have designs to bring that player to the LAN anyway. So it's really not as big as an issue as it appears to have been this week, in terms of how widespread it is. But it is something that I think needed to be addressed. And especially I know from 2CP's point of view, it's really, and as a team who's lost because of, well, as how we perceived it, because of an international carry, it is really frustrating and demotivating to lose to someone who's so clearly so much better than the team is on, and who are not suggesting that this is the case of the Prodigy Raft situation, but I think this is how it could be perceived when you lose the game. It's really disappointing and demotivating to lose in that kind of situation when you've got a player who's clearly A, so much better than the team is on, and B, also has the ping advantage that comes with being an international.
Yeah.
So you can understand why this is a contentious issue,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't want to be the next team that loses because of one player. And I agree with your points as well of basically play better, as rude as it is to put it that way. You're going to come up against 20. 20 is not an international, but he is a carry, just as an example. So what does it change the dynamic? No, it doesn't. You still have to deal with 20. And it kind of it's the same thing. You got to deal with that GM international, as frustrating as it is. But yeah, I think we spent a good amount of time on that conversation. But it's an interesting one to have. Yeah,
it definitely is. I think it's something that not only is it interesting as it's controversial and it brings out a lot of opinions, it's also a conversation that needs to be had at the end of the day. So it's important.
At the end of it, it's everybody has an opinion on it. 100%.
Yeah. So I think we've touched on BZK TCP. The Berserk team has had a really difficult start to the league so far. Currently sitting on 0-4, having lost 3-1 to Unidentified, clean sweep to Eden, 3-0 to Prodigy, as we've just been discussing, and 3-1 to Boostio. So really not quite the season they've been looking forward to. A team that looked like they were on the up and up from previous league.
Yeah. We were expecting them to be like fourth or fifth, but which could probably still happen.
Yeah.
So let's not take anything away from them. I think they're still a very good strong
and
team.
They've had a really difficult series of matches, right?
Yeah.
They're playing all the hardest teams first.
Yeah.
So this is not as dire as it looks for TCP, I think.
And I think there's a lot of positives they can take away from the Boostio's game.
Yes, and the Unidentified game as well.
Mm-hmm.
So then we move to our last team in Print Division, and that's Dominion. Currently sitting bottom of the log with an 0-3 record, having lost 3-0 to Phoenix Rising, 0-3 to Boostios, and who is the last team? 0-3 to another team. Goliath Gaming.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, disappointing season for them so far. But not quite unexpected given that they've lost a number of players.
Yeah, I think that's the main issue.
Yeah, had quite a bit of roster shuffles. We obviously having played them, have an insight on what their playstyle is. What do you think is part of their weakness, Jen?
I think
if you can.
Can you remember we did like a VOD review on their game before we played them?
Yeah.
And we were expecting a certain roster to play against us.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we played, it was a completely different team.
I think the one that sticks out to us obviously is Bros.
Yeah.
But also
Corpy.
Who didn't play against us, but also Corpy in for Death Seed, I believe. Yeah. That's a very strange decision if they did decide that, if that wasn't forced upon them. It's a very difficult situation to play with a different main tank than usual. Yeah. That for me is like the one thing I never want to do.
Yeah.
Like if we have matches to organize, the first person I talk to is Physics, because I'm like, I don't want to play with a main tank I'm not familiar with. So
I think like from what I'm seeing, like the first game when they lost to, was it Unidentified or can't remember, but anyway, their first game they lost, and we've reviewed that game. We did identify that the main tank wasn't as like, he wasn't following like, what was the weakness basically. Sorry, I'm struggling with the words. I'm tired now. but anyway, like we identified that, and I think they themselves also thought like, look here, maybe bringing in Corpy will adjust that. but
Yeah.
unfortunately it didn't. So
And
yeah.
perhaps not synergizing with him,
Yeah.
given the short amount of time they've had with him.
Hmm.
CloudBurst, anything to add on there?
Not too much. I haven't seen much of Dominion myself, sadly, so I can't really make too much of an decision.
Mm.
Of course, casting that Goliath versus Dominion match, there were a few times where we could see them just about to come back, really seeing them take the point from Goliath and expecting something big, but then they weren't able to keep it. And I think that's a big part about what's happening in the team there, especially with what you guys have said, a lot of roster changes and such. I can understand how that can leave a team in a bit of a disarray from where they want to be, especially staring down a Goliath of a team.
Yeah.
As we see coming from Goliath Gaming, they're really able to consistently apply pressure, which is going to make things difficult for Dominion, who is in a bit of a stasis with their roster at the moment. So I think there's a lot they're going to have to do going forward, but seeing what they can do once again is it's the love of the game there.
Yeah, for sure. So that about wraps up our first our Premier Division standings so far. I think this is really like First Division. Anyone could end up anywhere at the end of this leg. I'm really excited to see how this all plays out. Okay, I think that about wraps it up. That's Prem covered, First Division covered. We heard a little bit about CloudBurst and how he got started and where it's going. So thanks, CloudBurst, for joining us. It's a bit last minute, I know, but hopefully we can make something happen with you more regularly, perhaps. But otherwise, we will keep going with a rolling guest structure. Don't know who we're gonna have on next week, but we've got a couple of names in the hat. So yeah, thanks for joining us. Thanks, Jen, for being around as usual.
Not a problem. It's always
It's been
And-
good to
awesome.
be here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers, guys.
Adios.